podcast. This is an international relations podcast, and today we are diving into the evolving dynamics of Bangladesh, a country at the crossroads of political transition, economic resilience, and regional diplomacy. We are honored to have with us Professor Ranjita Chakraborty, a renowned professor of political science at the University of North Bengal. With her experience and expertise in gender and politics, public administration, human rights, development studies, Professor Chakraborty offers profound insights into South Asian affairs, especially the socio-political intricacies of Bangladesh. Thank you for joining us today, Professor.
Thank you, Srishti. And it's also a privilege to be a part of you.
Let's start with our first question, Professor. Could you throw some light on the current chief advisor, Muhammad Yunus's political legacy?
We need to understand that Muhammad Yunus was actually, if you look at him, there is a complex mix. Number one, he is taken as a moral voice, and he is also an international figure. And his conflict with Hasina, the earlier government, it dates back to those days when he was kind of, it was alleged that there was a lot of corruption, mismanagement of funds with regard to Grameen Bank. But at the same time, he was also the one who was internationally recognized, and he was taken as the one who showed a new path to many of the developing countries, especially to the margins, to develop themselves as empowered individuals. So he was kind of looked up to by people as someone who would get rid of the corrupt, not so good a government that was there. So that was the kind of an image that was seen, and it is also something that he stood for. But again, there is another view which looks at him as an international agent, an agent of US, who is there and who is trying to do right things for the US and also give US that space in the BOB region.
Ma'am, Mohammad Yunus has indicated that he might not be interested in contesting the elections. So, what do you think it implies for the democratic transition of Bangladesh?
Yes. Now, if you look at the rise of Yunus and the fall of Sheikh Hasina, or ouster of Sheikh Hasina, then you would see that two things were very important. One, this Nagorik Shomiti, or this NCP, the Citizens Party that emerged, which was essentially a group of students who were not happy with the government, earlier government, the kind of corruption that was happening, the kind of coercions that were taking place. BNP, which was obviously wanting to come, they didn't want, the Awami League was their rival. So, and there were a lot of cases put on the BNP chief. BNP and NCP, when they came and supported to Yunus, was the leader who was the face of the movement, and who became the one who was a citizen's voice, and who was trying to take Bangladesh to a new place where it would be a new kind of a government, new a set of reforms that would come. Now, if you look at NCP, then NCP stood for constitutional reforms. It wanted to bring in a lot of reforms, and it talked about a new kind of Bangladesh. On the other hand, BNP, of course, was more interested in kind of becoming the new government or heading the new government, and also going for elections. So there you will find that there is, right now there is also a conflict. The NCP is okay with April 26th as election time, whereas now BNP and NCP, and there are also mutual distrust. Like BNP is alleging that Yunus is actually being biased towards the NCP and giving them more mileage in political dialogues and discussions, whereas BNP is also pointing out that it wants certain people inside NCP to be removed when these platforms are shared or when they talk about various kind of issues. So that's a very interesting thing that we are observing, that how they are looking at it right now. When you see that there are also arguments that probably Yunus doesn't want to leave power, so he's there. And Yunus is also coming out as a very, very poor leader in matters of law and governance, as you would see the visuals, and you would also see the kind of atrocities over the minorities as is being alleged and also being pointed out by various international organizations, human rights organizations. So right now it's a kind of you would see that there is a tussle for power, which is also visible. Very interesting.
Ma'am, could you tell us more about the current government's take on the former ruling party Awami League? And who are the non-state actors that are hand in gloves with the current government in policy making?
this particular using is this particular regime to finally end any kind of influence of Awami League. Now, non-state actors, the civil society groups, they have been a part of the movement earlier, as we had seen that the students, although many people have pointed out that this was not just these were not pure students, but maybe they were supported by certain Islamist groups, and there were certain other hidden groups which were behind this. But at the same time, you would see that the commerce, the business groups, the lobbies, they were a part of this. They wanted to see something else in Bangladesh. They wanted Bangladesh to kind of emerge and use its strategic location.
Ma'am, what do you think are the economic priorities for Bangladesh currently as it transitions towards a middle income group country?
Actually, if you see the Chamber of Commerce, Bangladesh Chamber of Commerce, they were actually they are wanting, because you see what has got affected is, if you look at Bangladesh, then their economy is sagging, and they would want a lot of investment. Now, interestingly, India could have done that. India could have used it. So, for example, if I speak from Indian perspective, India could have used it in the sense that India could have invested. But you would see, if you look at the investment pattern, then two things are coming out. One, China is the largest investment partner in case of Bangladesh. It has been able to leverage it, and USA has become the most important export partner for Bangladesh. Whereas India, which growing up as a very prosperous economy within the region, India could have used it. So definitely, they are not very happy that India did not share its prosperity in terms of investments, in terms of kind of helping, or like what would these industries would want. They would want investments. Now that kind of thing, they were not happening, and so these civil society organizations are now wanting, like these business groups would really want more and more investment. If someone is ready to invest in me, then I would be more open to that. What could be the more chances, what could be the more options, the available options through that, so that we could get more investments.
Ma'am, Chittagong and Cox's Bazar have been central to Bangladesh's economy. Could you elaborate more on why they are so important?
Yes. If you look at this region, this is also called the economic capital of Bangladesh. And also, if you look at it from a strategic perspective, that is, it has got a lot of ports. It has two important ports. Rather, one is the Cox's Bazar, other is the Pekua, which is strategically very important. And what you would see that this is also the region where it is there is a lot of ethnic issues. It's a very disturbed issue as well, but at the same time it has a lot of options, in the sense that you would see financial institutions have developed. It is the headquarter of many MNCs, and there is a lot of Chinese population also residing in this region. And this is as the Bangladeshi kind of vision for 2041 was released. It showed that it had a lot of rather, Bangladesh was thinking in terms of opening it up, or rather developing it as a special export zone, and also as economic zone, and also looking into the development potential for blue economy. Then also talking about in Bangladesh just didn't want to remain as the only garment exporter. It also wanted to expand its export base. It also wanted to go for certain other kinds of things, which like sea related things, blue economy related things, pharmaceutical related things, and it wanted to expand. And this was the region that it had a lot of vision for, a lot of kind of what you would say plans coming up in the near future. So you would see that this Cox's Bazar and Chittagong Hill Tract is very economically very important for Bangladesh. And secondly, it is strategically also very important for the region as such. So Bangladesh, if it understands this strategic importance, so then it needs to also, or it is probably understood it, and so it can this particular region can play a major role in near future.
Ma'am, the region also unfortunately faces a lot of security challenges. Could you elaborate on that, please?
If you look at the security challenges, then if you look at first is let us look at the region, Chittagong Hill Tract, CHT. Now, CHT has an internal dynamic, that there is an internal issue that is not getting highlighted much, but in 2010 there was an act passed with regard to the small ethnic communities, whereby it was said that they would be called adibashis, or they were Khudro Janajati. Now, this has been a problem with the people in this region, who feel that there is a threat to their identity from the bigger Bengali elites or the Bengali nationalists, and they are feeling that there is a threat to homogenization, that they would, their culture, their language, their way of life, that would be, there is a political strategy to homogenize. And there is this, in 1960, when this Kaptai Dam was made, there was a lot of displacement, and this displacement happened here only in this region. And this particular region is also close to or next to Myanmar, where you are seeing that Rohingya issue has happened, and these Rohingya people have come in and they have again added to the population of this region. So there is already a threat that this region is experiencing. The people are not happy with the way things are, because they are resisting this kind of this nomenclature, that they are Khudro Janagoshti or small communities, because they want to assert their position, and they feel that this tendency to homogenize needs to be resisted, this naming needs to be resisted. And they have raised this issue, that is, there is a politics of naming that is happening, whereby the larger identity wants to impose and they want to annihilate these groups. So this is one issue. The second issue is that, added to it, this influx of Rohingyas who are Muslims. Now, there was already an issue with these indigenous groups who want themselves to be called indigenous and not Adivashis, because they feel that their own religion, their own culture needs to be protected against the threat of this the Islamic threat, that is homogenization in terms of religion. Now, when the Rohingyas come in, so they are in between. Now, you would see that there is another issue that has emerged, apart from the fear that there might be a tendency to kind of carve out a different land. There is also something that is getting discussed, that probably this region, that is this Rohingya region and the Chittagong region, they may form a buffer region in between, and so this might be solved. Now, it is this is a threat that is there, that a threat, that there was a conflict already within, and then now another set of conflicts has come inside. And this as reports are coming out, this region is this these Rohingya people, they are having a lot of human rights violation, because in these refugee camps, especially women and children, they are at the worst end, because there is a lot of trafficking that is being said and they are being used. So when there is a denial of rights in rightless situations, you will find that there is also a tendency to have certain kinds of conflict situations. So the conflict would rather increase, instead of and Bangladesh needs to look at it in a very very serious manner. It needs to focus on it.
Ma'am, there's a recent speculation of the spillover of Rohingya crisis into India. This is also strengthened by the Indian government's pushback of the illegal immigrants from Bangladesh back into Bangladesh. What is your take on the same?
Yes, definitely, definitely. When there is a kind of a serious issue in your neighbor, this is definitely going to impact your country as well. And we have seen that there has been a lot of influx of refugees, Rohingya refugees inside the region. And in fact, the state from where I come, West Bengal, there are a lot of issues. There are many cases where Rohingyas have been caught or they have been arrested in railway stations. They have been arrested in certain places where they have been staying. And there are news reports which is showing that they have also have camps in Delhi. They have reached that part, and they have also moved to Kashmir. So definitely India is kind of very clear on it, that it doesn't want to, it is not kind of it is going to support, but it is not giving them some kind of settlement. It cannot do so. Added to the problem, India already has a huge population, so this needs to be taken care of. And since these people are the people from Myanmar needs to take these people inside, and they cannot just stay in India and stay there as refugees, because it's already there is a lot of resource competition for India already. And when the good set of people comes, a large number of people are entering, so that means a lot of more problems for India in terms of how does India distribute its resources, because it doesn't have that, because it has also to deal with its own population. So there's already issues emerging. One issue that had happened, in fact it was pointed out, and there were evidence also, that Bangladesh was being used by the Chinese intelligence as well as Pakistani ISI earlier, before Hasina, and that was also one of the reasons that Hasina was she was admired by the government of India and taken as a friend, because it was they were using it to create. They were giving them safe places for running the camps. They were giving them support, and they were using the land of Bangladesh to kind of plan and exercise certain kind of insurgencies in the Northeast India, and keep Northeast India always in the throes of kind of conflict. But subsequently this has been kind of dealt with, tackled, especially from the flushing out of the Ulfa from the Bhutanese land. And then in Bangladesh also, the way Hasina government looked at it and dealt with it. So at that point of time we thought that the problem is resolved. But again, there is a threat now, because there is a recent news that ISI operatives, they have visited the Chittagong hill tracts, and they have entered further inside, because now it's open, and they have come very close to Siliguri corridor also, which is the only line through which the rest of India is connected to the Northeast India. So there is a crisis, or rather a threat over this region that we are having, and some more conflicts in Northeast India, because you can only do something if a country is developing economically, and if its neighbors consider it as a threat to their existence. Because you see, if you look at historically, Pakistan and Bangladesh have always talked about two things. One, that they didn't like the size of India, because they felt it was an existential threat for them, that a large country in between them and in the region, who could kind of claim as a leader in this region, as a global leader in this region. This is number one. Number two is the fact that if a country grows economically, so they were feeling kind of, because they what would they say to their people who were talking. If you look at say for example, I'll just take the case of Pakistan for example. If you look at both of the countries, they became independent at the same time. But when you look at the development, you would see that there is a hell lot of a difference. And the leadership has always tried to retain its legitimacy or credibility by only talking about that how India was doing injustice to Pakistan, and how they should be kind of taking care of Kashmir, and so on and so forth. So this has been always one of the strategies. Now here, one is this existential crisis that was there, and another thing that has been a growing thing. I remember one paper that was by General Arshad, who was a president of Bangladesh, earlier president of Bangladesh, where he had pointed out that they did not trust India because of its big brotherly attitude. Now this is something very interesting, and like, this was coming from some leader who was from a country who actually was born because India supported that country in its fights for independence. Now interestingly, we are seeing just a reverse, and here um, this has been one of the major issues, some kind of a jealousy, sibling jealousy. But with Bangladesh, there is a interesting thing, that the country that was coming out of some countries support is not really trusting. So one of the reason could be India aired, or India did not develop a buffer zone also, which I personally feel. If I look at India, then India probably did not develop a buffer zone which would help India in case Hasina is ousted. So India probably erred there, or did not consider that as important.
on the perception in Bangladesh of India's big brother attitude and how is it influencing the bilateral relation.
India has been a threat because of this issue, that kind of Bangladesh fearing that India might take over, and there is a growing. In fact, this is not something new. You see, if you look at the media reports, even in the earlier years, that India, the people in Bangladesh, although they have been coming to India, they have been. There is a kind of a fear that this large country would take away my independence, or it is always trying to impose things on us. So there is always a kind of a feeling that I am being imposed upon by India. India is a kind of a big nation. This is number one. Number two is, when you talk of investment, China has been more than willing to invest in the region, of course for its own advantage, which is if you look at, one is this narrative of string of pearls, which is trying to bring up. Secondly, it needs access to a warm port in the Bay of Bengal, and Bangladesh is that. And Yunus, when he goes there, he is actually opening up that. And so China is more than willing to enter it, and also kind of counter the US hegemony. US also wants its to retain its hegemony within the region. And when China is coming up with lots of money to support, and USA is quite far off, so then there is going to be a lot of conflict. And that's the reason, one of the reason that they want is that investment from China. Secondly, if you look at Turkey, Turkey is also, it is something related to the religion. So that is the land of the caliph. And so Bangladesh, which is an Islamic religion, Islamic nation state, it wants, rather it we cannot ignore the fact that although Bangladesh had developed, but similarly, or at the same time, you would also see the development of Islamization of Bangladesh, especially the radicalization of the youth in Bangladesh. And recently, when Yunus pardoned the murderer of this Al Qaeda linked terrorist who murdered Abhijit Roy, who was a blogger and a US citizen, and the name of the terrorist was marked in the US State Department list as wanted. So this person was pardoned by Yunus, and interestingly, he is giving a lot of interviews and he is taken as a hero. Now that indicates there is some kind of which we did not see, or our intelligence did not kind of come up with, that how Jamaat is also spreading its wings. And BNP already was very close to it, but other groups also have kind of developed that. And this Islamization has also kind of taken away that whatever little was there. And you would see that in the various kind of media posts, in the kind of speeches that are coming out, and also in the kind of reports of atrocities on minorities, which is again not just on the Hindus but also on the tribals. They have also come up with many issues. So this is something that India probably again failed to look into, and or we didn't actually look much into it. So that is also one of the reasons, as I feel, that they are getting close to Turkey. That one is this that feeling of brotherhood, religious brotherhood. And with China, that I grow because China is giving me the opportunity to grow. So I use my strategic location to grow. And it is not that Yunus has done it. If you look at Hasina's government also, Hasina has been very, very clever in her. She has used India, friendship with India. She has also allowed the pro Chinese lobby in her government to prosper so that she gets the investment. She understood the strategic point. And at the same time, she did not leave the position of an ally of US. She retained that as well. So, how you handle it? So, Bangladesh has actually understood its strategic importance. As although Yunus recently has pointed out that we are the guardian of the ocean, not really, but they are, yes, they are strategically very important. Especially if we look at India, the way our two sides are flat, like in between you have Bangladesh and our two sides are there. So India definitely has to be very, very careful in this regard, because Bangladesh has understood its importance in the region. It's no longer that poor small state which needs protection. It is kind of, if it works well, it works, it plays its cards well, it can actually leverage its advantage.
Ma'am, Bangladesh has been increasing its defense procurements from countries like UK and Turkey. So, what does it imply for its regional strategic importance?
China has been one of the most important partners with regard to defense, and you would also see that here India failed again. India could have used this, that supplying arms or helping them to strengthen their arms. In that way, they could have kind of done something like added more tooth to their relationship. But then China took it away. China has been one of the most important supporter, and it is trying. That it's already Bangladesh has asked it to develop its Mongla port. So once Mongla is done, then Pekwa is also very close, which is strategically very important. And that way, it also fits into. It is like Bangladesh is feeling that it will develop its military position, military capability, and China is thinking that it would also help it in two ways. Rather, China will gain more because it would fit into its encirclement theory, that is string of pearls, and to contain India's influence in the region. And number two, also counter US hegemony, because it is now getting a better alternative, better position.
Ma'am, we have seen a lot of Japanese investments in Bangladesh. One reason could be the labor crisis. As the Japanese population is aging, they might need more labor. What do you think are the other reasons why Japan is so much interested in Bangladesh?
To invest. It's a part of its strategy to develop itself as a global leader in the region. And Japan is not just like China. If you look at China, it's a massive country. Whereas if you look at Japan, it's a very small one. But Japan is trying to use its power of knowledge and its technology to invest, because this period is also the period when you have to invest a lot in technology. You need high end technology, and Japan is using that to actually capture that kind of market where the not the China of course develops technology, but not to that level as Japan is developing. So China, although China is catching up fast, in fact within few years, in China's rise has been a very very peaceful rise, and China has leveraged or used globalization to its maximum. In fact, if you see the development, that which country benefited out of globalization, that China is number one. And China has developed its potential, but right now Japan is trying to also do it. And also remembering the fact that China and Japan already, they have certain conflicts, certain issues with regard to the control over the region, that is the eastern part of China, that is South China Sea. So Japan definitely wants also to enter the market, because Japan also needs a share of that market. There's growing need for demand for high end technology.
Ma'am, we all know that garment sector has been very important in Bangladesh. So could you please share more on how important is it for the economy and the employment in Bangladesh?
Yes. Actually, if you look at 80% of the apparel sector was dominated by Bangladesh, because Bangladesh had cheap labor, and these are the main exporter. The country that exported most of these things were USA, and of course retaining that. But there were certain cases like when there was a fire in a garment factory, then there were issues with regard to that. There is a lot of violation of laws, and so many other things, and tariffs were put. So USA very often have played, and Bangladesh doesn't want to just depend on this. It wants to develop. In fact, the high end fashion sector, if you look at, it is drawing its resources. Even Indian fashion sector is also, you would find that they are drawing resources from the cheap cloth that is from Bangladesh. So Bangladesh has been one of the major sources because of its cheap labor and its also skill. But it doesn't want only to remain in that sector, as we could see in the vision, that it wants to develop in other areas also. Bangladesh has a vision. It doesn't want to live in this where you are just manufacturing garments, but it wants to come up and also compete with the other countries in other sectors. But then this is its traditional advantage that you'd see.
Ma'am, students have played a very important role in recent government change in Bangladesh. So, how important are they in the UNICEF's government, and how do they influence the policy decisions there?
One thing, that is what BNP is saying also. BNP's argument is that as well, that Yunus is playing into, because Yunus is not emerging, is not able to assert himself, and somewhere down the line they are the two controversial advisors. They are the ones who are controlling the games, and so the BNP wants them to be removed. But yes, NCP is emerging, and it is later. Right now they don't want any, like, they don't want to be political, they don't want to be seen as political agencies, but they just want to kind of bring in reforms and as the voices of the student. But we cannot forget the fact that they are also, they are, they were inclined, because they do have some political vision. So in future probably they might come up with a party, they might be emerging as a very very important contender for the government when there is election, when we find that there is an election. So maybe that is the reason that they are okay with April 26th. Maybe they are kind of bringing up people, and so that they emerge as a very strong political force. Because once they have come, I don't think so that they would want to just leave the stage. Like one the new government, they would not want to be the ones who would clean up the place for, because they would not want to be called the agents. Because whoever comes later, who would not come to power, they would say, okay, that government was brought in by NCP, and so NCP, I guess, would not want themselves to be looked at like that. Rather they would want to also take a very uh, position of formidable position. They would want to be the one who would take decisions as the decision makers. So later we might see something coming up, and very soon, I guess.
Ma'am, Mohammad Yunus has indicated that he might not be interested in contesting the elections. So, what do you think it implies for the democratic transition of Bangladesh?
Right now, if you see, Yunus is not very interested to also leave power. Right, he is also there as he is there, kind of operating as if he is a balance, he is a balancing factor. And number two, if Yunus, and but the one thing, age is not in his side. Right, age is not on his side, so he might not contest elections. uh, and if there is an election, BNP is trying very hard to come to power, and it would use everything. And the kind of issues, as we would see the media projections, that during the earlier regime there was a lot of coercion, there was a lot of they tried to annihilate the or silence the opposition. All those things are coming up, and so we would see that maybe BNP has a good chance if there is a kind of an election. And at the same time, we cannot say that Awami League would not come back, because again there are visuals where we see that people are coming up, they are not no longer that scared. Initially we saw that how they were scared, but now we are not seeing that they are so scared in professing their kind of ideology or talking about their loyalty to Awami League. So Awami League might also come up, or maybe a new party would emerge. And there is every possibility that there might be a new political formation which would emerge as the one who would be bringing reforms to the country, bringing a new Bangladesh, or giving rise to a new Bangladesh. So that could be there.
There's ongoing speculations of Sheikh Hasina's return to Bangladesh. So, could you tell us more on how would it impact the internal security and international relations in general?
uh, that is something what if I am to frame the question, I guess the question was very interesting. The if you look at it this from this perspective, that okay, we say that there the elections declared, and now the two questions are very important. Whether all parties are free to contest, number one. Number two, whether Awami League is out of the picture. So if Awami League is out of the picture, so then it means that there will be a new way of coming up. Maybe the name would not be there, something else would come, and there would be people coming together and bringing in. But as of now, we are seeing that nobody is really much interested to look at it. Right now, you would see that two things are very important. Whether when we look at Bangladesh, question is, does Bangladesh have an independent opinion now? Do they have an independent voice now? This is important question. Or they are just playing up to the agents who are working, like China. They are going to China and talking. President Yunus is going to China and saying that, see, you can come and work in Bangladesh and you can take over Northeast, and I am allowing you. Now, which country's leader would say such a thing, that I'm allowing you to do this, and knowing that? So they don't really have a vision also with regard to how they would interact with their neighbor. India is a big neighbor for them. So that is something which is indicating that they really do not have a very very independent voice or a sane voice. This is number one. Number two, when you look at the kind of actions happening, so right now it is, they are talking about some kind of reforms, but no real reform has happened, and that is emerging gradually because the other groups, especially the civil society actors, are now raising issues, especially the business groups. They have already started raising concerns that if we continue like this, then our economy will be going to a point where we cannot bring back. So we would want a very stable government. So we need to see that what kind of role they play in future. Because if definitely they will do something, because they would want investment, they would want a good economy, because that way they would also develop. So this is something that we need to look into. And in this situation, if they find that no other leader is in a position to give them that, that is a stable government, stable economy, so there might be some other situation which we may see. Right now we are seeing that it's a lot of kind of a very gray area emerging, uh, where there are issues of human rights violations. People have started talking about human rights violations. There are internal issues, law and order issues. There are issues of lawlessness that we are seeing. There are, as I discussed with you, that about the CHT, Chittagong Hill Tracts. They are also, although they are strategically important, but then you cannot ignore the fact they already had internal issues, and now added to it is the this influx of refugees, Rohingya refugees staying there, and they are and often the problem happens at the grassroots, because these people, there is a lot of competition for work at the grassroots, where you would see the market is opening up. The locals who can demand a particular as decent money, now they are not able to get that job because somebody else is taking away, because ready to work at a lower price, lower quote. Now that is a very very serious issue, and if the government doesn't see, this would lead to a civil conflict, and it is something that is in the offing. Now that indicates that, or rather we need to understand that how do we even the leadership needs to look at it and understand that how do they contain these crises and bring in the reforms that they are talking of. So in this kind of a situation, what should they invest more time on? Should they invest more time on asking, like you would see, initially there was a question of asking India to return Hasina should come, and they would be filing cases, and so on and so forth. But I'm telling you one thing, that this would not stop also, because again it's a question of credibility. So as and when they will not be able to deliver, and people will be, or they will find that they people are going to question the real issues. These are the real issues which right now we are not seeing them discussing. So if they are not discussing these real issues, then the question would come that, why not bring Hasina? People might say that Hasina would give them a good government. So they would start again saying that, no, Hasina needs to be, we need to actually bring her to court and bring or give justice to the people who were kind of at the receiving end from the government. So, and also whatever the government's crimes or whatever it is that they are pointing out, so those need to be put to justice. So they would again raise the same issue. So again they would find the same narrative emerging. Right now you are not seeing it, but the moment these questions come, this narrative would again be brought into the forefront.
Also, ma'am, India has maintained a very calm and silent approach to the recent political changes in Bangladesh. So, is it strategically wise, and what could be the reasons behind this strategy?
India has kind of late, if you look at India's position, India has been very, very silent in many cases. India's foreign policy decision is to one maybe to kind of uh, some allow the autonomy to the other nation and not discuss because it is an internal issue. So not let talk, don't let us talk about it. So India did not talk even when you look at Ukraine and Russia. So India never raised its voice. India did not raise its voice when there is genocide happening between Israel and Gaza. It did not talk much about it. In fact, it did not say anything. So this is also one issue that people are raising, that when minorities are being if you look at the political regime in India, which is talking about the protection of the Hindus, but it is not saying anything about the atrocities on the Hindus that is happening there in Bangladesh. So then the question emerges that why India is so silent. One argument could be that India is observing, or and obviously India has erred diplomatically because India failed to read the situation. India, the one of the arguments that the people in Bangladesh, why are they so? We need to look into the fact that why people in Bangladesh have had become so anti-India. One of the reason is that definitely India never said anything against Hasina. India should had, or it should have had kind of developed its buffer region. So if there is a turbulence, then India can actually depend on it. India failed there. So right now India is probably watching the situation. And number two, India is also kind of measuring that what would be the level, because if you see that when this question of two things were very important when they talked about this port, use of Chittagong port, and then India's thought that it would develop, or rather India started the project of developing a roadways so that this landlocked northeast is linked to the port. So India has invested on it. This is number one. So India is thinking of alternatives, like if such a situation emerges, that what can India do. It is good there. And number two is India is also looking at that what is the next thing that the other two players are doing, because one thing is very important, that India is in the upper riparian region. That is also we have to understand. The Ganga treaty is going to end next year. It was a 30-year treaty. It's going to end next year. So northern Bangladesh depends on these waters. Second is Tista River treaty that is still not settled. So Bangladesh also needs to, the government also needs to talk to or respond to its people. So how do they get water? Water is very important. We cannot forget that it is an agrarian region also. So you need the support of India. So India is waiting for that. Probably it's just measuring time and seeing that where this particular whole political drama would lead to. And number two, probably India is also observing the, because when radicalization happens, it happens, but at the same time the real thing is that people need jobs, people need development, people want to develop. So um, definitely this demand would also come. You cannot stop the voices of the people saying that okay, see, we have removed Hasina government and we are going for reforms, but the question is, where are the reforms? What kind of reforms have you come up with? We have not seen many. This is number one. So India is probably buying its time and trying to develop and silence, or rather, it is better. It's hot now, so India is waiting for it to cool down, and then India would enter. And with regard, and that is also one of the reason probably that India is not talking about minorities. It is allowing the international organizations to raise the issue. If you see, many international organizations have raised the issue about this kind of atrocities on the minorities. So this is something that is a very clever strategy, and India doesn't want to create an enemy, because India also understands its the position of Bangladesh inside, and India needs to have, because if it needs to develop economically, develop itself, India needs a very peaceful neighborhood. So India cannot risk by entering into the days are past, like earlier we would see that Indira Gandhi entered and she helped in creating Bangladesh. It was an internal, and that is why Pakistan was angry that it was an internal issue, and India interfered in it. But at the same time, if you look at Sri Lanka crisis, it didn't happen the same way. So India cannot right now enter Bangladesh or try to interfere in it. But at the same time, it should probably it is silent if you look at from the government perspective. But definitely there are operations happening at the grassroots level so that friendships can be or some kind of conversation can be started with Bangladesh. So we don't have an enemy there because we need each other in our growth. And in fact, Bangladesh needs more. It needs India more. So even if you say that yes, China will come inside and it will start its economic zones or it will set up its military base or whatever it is, but we cannot forget, and Bangladesh also remembers the debt traps that China creates, because this is also something that is coming up amongst the intellectuals, that this could be a strategy of debt diplomacy and which would drive Bangladesh to such a point that it would break down, its economy would break down. We have seen Sri Lanka. We have seen how what Sri Lanka went through. So this could be also one thing, and India is waiting for that. That when and already we are seeing some shifts.
Ma'am, on a forward looking note, what do you think should be the steps taken to strengthen the Indo Bangladesh relations, especially in areas like trade, security, cultural ties, to foster mutual prosperity?
First thing is India should, as a bigger neighbor, India and economically stable, India should extend its hands to Bangladesh in sense of investment, giving them investment opportunities instead of like how India reacted when there was a conflict. India reacted by restrictive visa. Now, what happened to this is that India also had a lot of Bangladeshi people entering India for medical tourism, so that market got affected. If you go to many regions where Bangladeshi patients would come for medical treatment, they would say, in fact I can give you how people went ahead with it, that in our region many people from Bangladesh they come because we are means I am located in a place which is 0 kilometer from Bangladesh. We have a border with Bangladesh. So many people from Bangladesh they would come for medical treatment, and there was a kind of suddenly people at the height of the conflict, people said that the hotel owners they would not rent or they would not give them rooms. But subsequently the market pressures were talking about that we would kind of give those people who are critically ill, and gradually whole thing got dissolved, and now everything is very very normal. Now what is important is in any conflict situation the big neighbor should always retain its cool head instead of going for those restrictive visa or stopping imports, because it affected people. So what would happen was the people would get angry. So now India needs to work with the civil society. India needs to extend its hand and kind of share the prosperity that India has with the people. And also other thing that has also did not go down well with Bangladesh is the recent, after the Pahalgam attack, the pushbacks that has happened. And in many of the cases it was found that people who were, and this has actually led to two things, that in because of the kind of issues, very often it happens that those who were speaking Bengali they were picked up and they were treated as migrants and pushed back, and it was found that they were not migrants, they were actually Indians. Now this also gives a wrong message to the people in Bangladesh, is that India is being very harsh, and it helps those who want to use this to their advantage. Those countries, the handlers, they would be able to use this and leverage it to their advantage by saying that India is an enemy. so India now needs to use its soft power strategies, because if you see Bangladesh and West Bengal, they are similar in terms of the language they speak. They have more or less the same culture. So using this, because very often the Bangladeshi film stars they come to West Bengal and they are a part of Bengali films. They are doing films. So there are many singers who have worked in Bollywood as well. I remember this singer called James, who was very popular in Bollywood. Now, these kind of exchanges should be increased so that we are able to create that trust. We need to develop that trust. India needs to develop a trust. At the same time, protect its interest. Protects its interest because its interest is also in stopping more Chinese influence. More Chinese influence would mean difficulties for India. Number one. Number two, Pakistani handlers inside, because often it was this narrative was also used, like Pakistan was kind of spreading this, and there has been also some scholars pointing Pakistanization of Bangladesh recently. Now, this needs to be also understood and handled very cautiously by the Indian government, number one. Number two, it needs to also understand that if the other two players become more powerful, then India would also be in a difficult position, because Northeast needs to have a very safe, because it needs development. Now India has invested a lot of money on developing this region, especially connectivity and all. So if we could develop this region, then we are also opening up ourselves to East Asia and lot of benefits to the entire region. So India should talk not as India, but as a voice of the poorer nations, as a voice of the South. And that is the role that India should stand for. And it is already started in G20, for example, India brought in Africa. So, similarly, it should very cleverly use its soft power strategies to create spaces so that India can again rebuild its trust and friendship with whoever comes to power, and also take stand. Also take stand with regard to various issues that would also give a message. But as of now, India should also look at the various regions where there has been a lot of you would see that it's every day there is a issue that is not gone down to the people, because see, migration often takes place between high performing economy to low perform. It is always from low to high. So people migrate from India to America or to Canada to get better opportunities. So Bangladesh people have also migrated, but the question is of illegal migration, and how can India resolve it with the government. That is important, instead of just taking it as you are targeting people. This is the image that has gone down, that they are targeting people and pushing them out. These are poor people. So that is very wrong on the part of India, and that is something that India needs to look into. And I think this narrative also needs to be a little toned down by the government in Delhi, that in the states where this is happening, you need to little tone down your arguments so that it doesn't go that bad with Bangladesh.
Ma'am, as we wrap up, do you have any closing statements for our listeners for the future of Bangladesh and what is its place in South Asia?
I would be closing my statements with that India, both for India and Bangladesh, we are strategically linked, and we should not forget that China is a global power. It's wanting to be a global. It's already a global power, and it wants. Although we are talking about a multipolar world, but we are actually in an oligopolar world. We can rather call it an oligopolar world, and India must leverage its size and its earlier friendship and try to build a trust, and also support people, and also work in a more politically sensible way. Rather than keeping quiet, sometimes it is needed to at least give a soft murmur. That is also important, because that would help in building trust.
Perspectives and for sharing your expertise on Bangladesh with us today. It has been a really fascinating session. And to our listeners, if you like this episode, subscribe to Foresight Podcast for more insights into global affairs. Until next time, stay informed and foresighted.